I remember very clearly a period in my life when every morning felt like I had already lost a battle, even though the day had not yet begun. There was no major incident, no obvious shock, just a heavy feeling. A very familiar kind of heaviness, heavy from tiredness, heavy from boredom, heavy because my mind was already prepared with a list of things I did not want to do. What was strange is that I did not realize I was pushing myself downward from the very moment I opened my eyes. I thought it was just a natural emotional state. Until one day, I paid attention to the very first thing that appeared in my mind each morning. It was not a spoken sentence, just a very quick thought. Here we go again. And that thought pulled everything else along with it. When you begin a day in a state of endurance, that entire day becomes something you must survive, not something you actively live. You are not exactly giving up, but you are not truly present either. You work in a defensive mode, avoiding mistakes, avoiding exhaustion, avoiding disappointment, and you call that maturity. There was one very ordinary morning that changed the way I looked at this. I woke up earlier than usual. Outside, it was still dark. Everything was quiet. And in that moment, I realized something very clearly. No one was stepping into this day with me. No one was carrying the things I was about to face, and no one was telling me who I needed to be today. The first sentence in your mind every morning is like choosing a role for yourself. If you choose the role of a victim of circumstances, you will see everything as something that happens to you. If you choose the role of someone who takes responsibility, you will see everything as something you are allowed to handle. Many people think self-talk is a cheap form of self-motivation, but in reality, it is how you set your mental anchor. Before the world has a chance to say anything to you, you speak to yourself first. And that voice, if repeated enough, becomes the default. I started trying something very small. Every morning, before picking up my phone, before checking anything at all, I said one sentence to myself. Today, I will keep my word to myself. Not a big promise, just one very specific promise for that day. And the strange thing was that my entire day began to revolve around that sentence. You do not need 14 mantras right from the start. You need to understand why what you say to yourself in the morning carries so much weight. Because at that time, your mind has not yet been scattered. It has not yet been pulled into comparison. It has not yet been dragged into other people's rhythm. It is open. And whatever enters at that moment tends to stay longer. There was a man named Michael who once shared that he used to begin every morning by listing the things he feared: work, responsibility, expectations, and he could not understand why he was becoming more and more exhausted. When he switched to a different habit, simply reminding himself that he was allowed to move slowly and still make progress, his level of tension dropped noticeably, not because his circumstances changed, but because the way he stepped into the day changed. What you tell yourself each morning does not immediately make your life better, but it determines the posture with which you face life. Head down or head up, avoiding or stepping forward, being pulled along or choosing direction. In the next part, I will go deeper into why morning is the time when the mind is most easily programmed, and why most of us are unconsciously planting sentences in our own heads that make us weaker, then wondering why the entire day feels heavy. There is a truth that very few people notice. Your mind in the morning is not the same as your mind at night. At night, it is full of information, full of judgments, full of exhaustion. But in the morning, before the world has a chance to touch you, the mind is almost empty, and the first thing you put into it tends to shape the rest of the day. This is not vague spirituality. It is a very real mechanism. When you first wake up, your nervous system has not yet been strongly stimulated. The brain is looking for a signal to determine whether today is a safe day or not. And the very first voice that appears in your mind is that signal. If the signal is tension, the brain prepares for defense. If the signal is discouragement, the brain conserves energy. If the signal is clarity and steadiness, the brain cooperates. You cannot control everything that happens in a day, but you can decide the state your nervous system enters that day with. The problem is that most of us do not choose. We let the phone choose for us. Notifications, news, other people's lives. The moment you open your eyes, you let the world tell you who you are, what you should worry about, what you are lacking, and you accept that role unconsciously. There was a woman named Sarah who realized that every morning of hers began by checking work messages, and no matter how light the day actually was, she always felt chased. When she changed the habit, simply taking 2 minutes to sit still and remind herself that she was allowed to move at her own pace, the quality of her entire day changed noticeably. Not because the workload decreased, but because her posture entering the day was different. Self-talk is not about deceiving yourself into believing everything will be fine. It is about choosing an anchor point. When there are too many things outside your control, you need a few sentences that do not change. Not to comfort you, but to remind you who you are at the start of the day. A very common misunderstanding is thinking that self-talk has to be loud and motivational. But the most powerful sentences are often very simple. They do not try to excite you. They make you clear. Clear about your role. Clear about responsibility. Clear about what you do not need to carry. There is one sentence I like very much. Today, I do not need to be perfect. I only need to be honest with what I have chosen. That sentence does not make you feel high, but it keeps you grounded in reality. And when you stay grounded, you break fewer promises to yourself. You need to understand one thing. What you repeat to yourself each morning is not just words, it is a silent command. And your mind takes those commands very seriously, whether you are aware of it or not. In the next part, I will address a very common misunderstanding. That self-talk is self-deception, and I will show you why the strongest people are the ones who carefully control their inner dialogue. There is a very familiar reaction whenever people hear about self-talk. They frown. They think of cliches. They think of hypnotizing themselves into believing everything is fine when it clearly is not. And because they do not want to live in illusion, they choose to say nothing to themselves at all. But the problem is this: silence does not mean neutrality. When you do not consciously say something to yourself, another voice will speak up. The voice of doubt, the voice of fear, the voice of old failures. It does not need your invitation. It appears on its own, and it sounds convincing because it is built on real memories. This is a critical point. Self-talk is not about creating a false story. It is about choosing which story is allowed to repeat in your mind. Because if you do not choose, the past will choose for you. There was a man named Thomas who once said that he always believed he was a realistic person. He disliked positive affirmations, but every morning a very familiar sentence appeared in his mind. I am not good enough. He did not call that self-talk. He called it objective assessment, until he realized that this so-called assessment was deciding how he approached everything. He did not dare to try. He did not dare to stay. He retreated early, then used logic to justify it. The strongest people are not those who are always confident. They are the ones who do not allow every thought to have the right to direct action. They choose carefully. And that choice begins with very small sentences, repeated consistently. There is a big difference between lying to yourself and telling yourself what you need to hear. Lying is denying reality. Telling yourself what you need to hear is looking directly at reality, then deciding how you will respond. For example, instead of saying, I am not afraid, you say, I am afraid, but I will still do my part. The second sentence does not deny emotion. It puts emotion in the right place. That is why truly powerful self-talk is rarely decorative. It is instructional. It works like road markers. When you get lost, you see them and know where to return. There was one very memorable morning for me. I woke up with that familiar heavy feeling, work unfinished, pressure unresolved, and the old sentences started to appear. Today will be exhausting. I am behind again, but instead of letting them continue, I said a different sentence to myself. Today, I only need to do the next part, nothing more. That sentence did not remove the difficulty, but it stopped my mind from inflating difficulty into something impossible to overcome. And that is the true role of self-talk. Not to turn a bad day into a good one, but to stop a bad day from destroying you. When you understand this, you begin to respect control over your inner dialogue. You no longer see it as self-comfort, you see it as discipline. A very quiet discipline, but one that influences every decision that follows. In the final part, I will share 14 powerful things to tell yourself each morning, not as a list to memorize, but as mental anchor points, so you can choose a few that fit you and attach them to your real life. Every morning, before you step into the world, you need a few sentences that are steady enough to keep you upright, not to excite you, but to prevent you from being swept away. What follows are not affirmations meant to sound nice. They are reminders to hold on to at the moment when the mind is most vulnerable. Number 1. Today, I take responsibility for my attitude, even if I cannot control every circumstance. This places you in an active position, not a victim of the new day. Number 2. I do not need to please everyone. I only need to not betray what I have chosen. This cuts the need to prove yourself right from the start of the day. Number 3. My emotions are signals, not commands. This reminder stops a sluggish morning from deciding the entire day. Number 4. I allow myself to move slowly, as long as I do not turn back. This keeps you committed to the process instead of comparison. Number 5. The task I avoid today will be harder tomorrow. It is not a threat. It is simply a reminder of reality. Number 6. I do not need motivation to begin. I need to begin to create motivation. This sentence is designed to break procrastination. Number 7. Today I do this for my future, not for recognition. This gives meaning back to quiet effort. Number 8. I am not perfect, but I can be consistent. It lowers pressure while preserving discipline. Number 9. Not every thought needs to be believed. This creates distance between you and the destructive voice in your mind. Number 10. I will keep my word to myself, even in the smallest way. This is the sentence that builds the strongest identity. Number 11. Today, I choose to focus on what is within reach. It keeps you from being overwhelmed by things that are too big. Number 12. Every small action today casts a vote for the person I am becoming. This connects the present moment with identity. Number 13. I do not need to see the entire path. I only need to see the next step. This lightens vague fear. Number 14. No matter how today unfolds, I will return tomorrow. This sentence is for imperfect days. You do not need to carry all 14 of these at once. Choose a few that truly touch you, the ones that make you slightly uncomfortable because they hit a weakness directly. Those are usually the ones you need most. When you repeat them each morning, what changes is not your circumstances. What changes is the posture with which you step into life. You no longer wait passively to see what the day will bring. You enter with a mental map that is clear enough to keep you from drifting too far. What you tell yourself each morning will not turn you into a different person overnight, but it will decide who you become after many mornings like this. And that is the most sustainable kind of change a human being can make.